Welcome to another video. In this video we will be studying the topic of the high-low method. So what is the high-low method? So we will understand this method by looking at this example. So suppose you work in a company and you obtain the following data about its cost. So you are working in a company, it could be a manufacturing company, it could be a service company. So you are working in a company and you obtain the following data about its cost. So for example, when the activity levels was 162 units, activity levels means production or sales. Okay, so when the production or sales were 162 units, then the total cost was 18,100. When the activity level was 287 units, then the total cost was 24,350. When the activity level was 153 units, the total cost was 17,650. So on. So you have got the activity level, you have got the total cost at different activity levels of the organization. This is the data that you have obtained from the company records. So now you want to know what is the variable cost portion of it. What is the variable cost per unit? So wouldn't you think that if you got the variable cost per unit, it would be very useful for the organization. It would be very useful for the organization to know its variable cost per unit just by looking at this data, just by analyzing this data. So and also fixed cost in total. So the high-low method is a technique which we will use to apply to this data, and then we will obtain the variable cost per unit and the fixed cost in total. So don't you think this is going to be very valuable for your organization, right? This is going to be extremely valuable for your organization because you are just using its data, its total cost data, and you are going to figure out what's the variable cost per unit and what is the fixed cost in total. So let's apply the high-low method. So to apply the high-low method, you have to follow these steps. Very simple and easy steps. Number one step is find the highest and the lowest activity level. Highest and the lowest activity levels. Okay, so let's spot the highest and lowest activity levels. So 162, 287, 153, 134, 237. So till now 287 has been the highest, 265, 189, 180, and the last one is 295. So the highest activity level is 285. So this is the highest activity level. Okay, so 295 units is the highest activity level, and let's spot the lowest activity level. So 134 seems low. I think this is the lowest, right? Then 153, 162. Okay, so 134 is the lowest activity level. So we have completed our first step in the high-low method, and that was to find the highest and lowest activity levels. We have spotted the highest and lowest activity levels. What is the second thing that we are about to do? So the second step is to find the or determine or note the total cost at those activity levels. So the activity levels that we have identified in the first step, highest and lowest activity levels, we now have to note the total cost at those activity levels also. So the total cost at highest activity level was 242750. Sorry, 24750. $24,750. This was the total cost at the highest activity level, and the total cost at the lowest activity level is $16,700. Okay, so the second step is complete. Now what we are about to do, we are going to use a very simple formula to find the variable cost per unit. Find the variable cost per unit using following formula. So formula is variable cost per unit equals to highest activity level, or you could say this as, sorry, cost at highest activity level minus cost at lowest activity level. divided by highest activity level minus lowest activity level. So this is the formula for finding the variable cost per unit. Let's take the steps below. So what is CH and what is CL? What is H and what is L? H is the highest activity level, L is the lowest activity level, CH is the cost at highest activity level, and CL is the cost at lowest activity level. Okay, so this is the formula for variable cost per unit. What you have to use the four figures: highest activity level, lowest activity level, and cost at highest activity level, and cost at the lowest activity level. So let's use these figures. So cost at highest activity level. So the highest activity level was 295 units, and the cost at this activity level is $24,750. So minus CH, we have used the CH figure. Now we have to deduct the cost at lowest activity level, and that is 16,700. Let's put this in bracket. Now we have to divide this by the highest activity level minus lowest activity level. So highest activity level is 295 units minus lowest activity level is 134 units. Bracket close, enter. So this is the answer for our variable cost per unit. This $50 is what? This is the variable cost per unit. So we have found the variable cost per unit, and this was very easy, very simple. So let's understand that how is this formula actually working. So the formula is working by, you are simply calculating the change in cost. So the above part of the formula, in which we are deducting the cost at lowest activity level from the cost at highest activity level, we are looking at the change in cost, change in total cost. So change in total cost was this amount, 8,050. So and what was the change in activity level? The change in activity level was 295 units minus 134 units. So now note that the activity level changed by 161 units, and the change in total cost was $8,050. So why does a cost change? Is it due to variable element or is it due to the fixed element? So of course, whenever a cost changes, it is only due to the variable cost, right? So we simply calculate the change in cost per unit. So change in cost per unit is $50, which means it is variable cost, right? So variable cost could also be called as, this is the change in the cost, right? So change in cost or the variable cost, this is the $50. This is how the formula is working. So we are first finding the change in total cost and dividing this by the change in activity level. So we find the change per unit. So change in per unit is the variable cost per unit, right? So this is how we found the variable cost per unit. So now we have to find the fixed cost. So what is the fixed cost? We would first need to understand, before going to the fixed cost, we need to understand this equation: total cost at activity level, at any activity level. If you want to find total cost at any activity level, you use this formula. Total cost at activity level equals to fixed cost. This is the total figure for the fixed cost plus variable cost per unit multiply by activity level. So this is a formula that you use to find total cost at any activity level. So fixed cost remains fixed, of course, because it doesn't depend on the activity level. So you use the fixed cost total figure plus variable cost per unit times activity level. Why? Because variable cost per unit depends on the activity level. So or we could also write this as fixed cost plus variable cost, right? So the variable cost depends on the activity level, so we could extend this formula to write it as like this: variable cost per unit times activity level, because the total variable cost will depend on the activity level. So variable cost per unit, what will be the total variable cost? It will be equal to variable cost per unit times activity level. So this is how this formula works. Okay, so now to find the fixed cost, we are just reversing this formula. Okay, so the formula would become fixed cost equals to, we are just rearranging this formula. Okay, so total cost at activity level minus variable cost per unit multiplied by activity level. Okay, so this is the formula that becomes for the fixed cost. So now what activity level should we use? The activity level must be highest or lowest. Okay, preferably highest, but you can use the lowest activity level also. So let's find the fixed cost. So we'll take the highest activity level. So highest activity level, what is the formula for fixed cost? Total cost at activity level, meaning the highest activity level. So at the highest activity level, the total cost was $24,750. Now we will find the variable cost element. So variable cost per unit is $50 times activity level. So what was the activity level? We chose the highest activity level, so we will multiply it by the highest activity level. So this is the fixed cost element, $10,000, right? So you see, this was very easy to do. So we have we have found the variable cost per unit and the fixed cost in total. Now how can this be used? For example, if you found the variable cost per unit and you found the fixed cost per unit, how is this information going to be important to the organization? So this is going to be important to predict, to forecast figures. For example, if your manager wants to know what will be the total cost at 200 units, now you can answer this question. You can simply answer the you can simply tell the total cost at any activity level now, because you now know the variable cost per unit and the fixed cost in total. So this becomes very easy for you to forecast. So how will we forecast? So for example, total cost at 200 units would be, we will use this formula: fixed cost is $10,000 plus variable cost per unit. Variable cost per unit is $50 times activity level. Now what is the activity level that we are using in this forecast? Is 200 units. So multiply by 200. So our total cost would be $20,000. So you see, this is very simple, very easy to do. So you can look at it here to make sense. For example, 20,000, we said that the total cost would be at 200 units would be $20,000. So we can see for the 231 activity level, there was the total cost was 21,000, and for example at 189 units, the total cost was 19,450. So it makes sense that at the activity level of 200 units, the total cost would be around $20,000, right? So this is how the high-low method is used. So it is a very useful technique to split the mixed cost into its variable and fixed elements. So let's read this from the notes. So what is high-low method? It is a technique used in splitting mixed cost into its variable and fixed elements. So this is the formula that I wrote there in the Excel, and then the steps are written here as well. Same steps that I taught on the Excel, and then you could do this question. So let's attempt this question also. So what is this question about? It is asking us to split this cost into its variable and fixed elements. So we will apply the high-low method. So what was the first step? First step was to identify the highest and lowest activity levels. So what is the highest activity level? Highest activity level is 300 units and lowest activity level is 50 units. Then the second step was to identify the cost at those activity levels. So cost at highest activity level is $2,100, and at lowest activity level the cost is $1,600. and then we will find the variable cost per unit. How? So we will use this formula. So variable cost per unit equals to, we find the difference in cost 2100 minus 1600. Okay, what is 2100 is CH, cost at highest activity level, and what is 1600, it is CL, meaning cost at the lowest activity level. So we will do this in brackets. 2100 minus 1600, this is the difference in cost, this is the change in the cost, divided by what was the difference in activity level. It was 250 or 300 highest activity level minus lowest activity level 50 units. Sorry, so variable cost per unit is $2 per unit, right? So now we'll find the fixed cost. How will you find the fixed cost? We will use this formula, and both of these formulas are written in the notes. So here is the variable cost per unit formula: total cost at highest activity level and total cost at lowest activity level, highest activity level minus lowest activity level. And similarly, the fixed cost formula is written here as well. So total cost at activity level, so we'll choose the highest activity level. So what was the total cost at the highest activity level? It was $2100. So $2100 minus variable cost per unit times actual activity level, highest activity level, multiply by 300 units. So fixed cost would be $1500. Okay, so we have applied the high-low method on this question also, question from notes. So now one thing, the next part we can do this next part also. So forecast total cost if activity level is 280 units. Now we have to forecast the total cost for 280 units. If the activity level is 280 units, we have to forecast what will be our total cost. So our total cost would be fixed cost 1500 plus variable cost per unit $2 times activity level, meaning 280 units. So our prediction is that if the activity level increases up to 280 units, our total cost would be $22,060. So this was all. This is the high-low method. So it is very easy to apply. You just need to remember these steps. One common mistake include that sometimes students select the total cost, highest cost or lowest cost. So this is wrong. You have to first identify the highest activity level and the lowest activity levels, right? And then you have to identify the cost at those activity levels, right? You don't have to identify the highest or lowest cost. You have to identify the costs at those highest and lowest activity levels. So so this is the step 2. Okay, and then the step 3 is very simple. You have to calculate the variable cost per unit, and to calculate the fixed cost you have to use, you normally use the highest activity level. You can use the lowest activity level also. This will also result in the same answer, but it is preferable that you use the highest activity level for finding the fixed cost. So where will you use the activity level to identify the cost? For example, you will use the total cost at the highest activity level, and then you will use the variable cost per unit obtained from the step 3 from this formula, and then you will multiply with the highest activity level, okay, to find the fixed cost. So once you have got the variable cost per unit and the fixed cost in total, then you could use this formula to predict the total cost at any activity level, at any forecasted activity level. So a very simple technique that you could apply to any business, and this uses, as you saw, that this uses very little information. So now let's go to the advantages and limitations of the high-low method. So the first one is easy and quick to understand and use. So as you saw, this is very easy to understand and quick to use, and you need very minimal amount of data to apply it. And then the second part is can analyze cost into variable and fixed elements. So of course this is very useful for any organization to forecast once the variable and fixed elements are known. So forecasting becomes much easier. It uses highest and lowest activity levels, which covers all ranges of data. So why is this called the high-low method, or why does it use the highest and lowest activity levels? The reason is because it wants to cover all ranges of data. So for example, it could be possible that, for example, when the activity level is to its maximum level, then the cost might have behaved a bit differently. So that is why the high-low method uses the highest and lowest activity levels. So it covers all the possible ranges of data and the behavior across those range. Useful for planning, so of course very useful for planning and forecasting. So limitations include only provides estimated cost. So of course this is just an estimate, and then there is assumption that the cost per unit change stays the same regardless of activity. So of course variable cost per unit doesn't remain the same regardless of activity, it changes. Why? Because for example, if you are if the activity level increases, if you are doing more production, then normally you would need to purchase more material, and normally you would be purchasing it at a discounted price. Why? Because if you are going to buy more materials, then the supplier normally offers you a discount. So variable cost per unit, normally what happens is that variable cost per unit drops when the activity level is increasing. So, but the high-low method assumes that the variable cost per unit stays the same regardless of activity. Okay, so I should write it here, not cost per unit, but variable cost per unit. Okay, so variable cost per unit stays the same regardless of activity. This is an assumption which is mostly not true. Then uses extreme figures. So highest and lowest, these are extreme figures which does come at a benefits because it covers all ranges of data and the behaviors across those range. But it also of course is a limitation, because if you use the extreme figures, they may have behaved differently than normal figures. So maybe you have gained, for example, you have obtained a very big discount that have distorted the total cost at highest activity level, and if you forecast at the normal activity levels, then maybe you could end up with a lower total cost than what it could actually be would result in. Okay, so in the third point, it's based on the past figures. So of course it is all based on past figures, past data, your past cost data. So of course this is a limitation. Any forecast that you make has this limitation, because any forecast is based on the past figures. Actual figure could be affected by inflation, technological improvements, policy changes, etc. If possible, actual figures could be used from invoices for finding variable and fixed cost figures. So if it is possible, the right way to find the variable cost per unit and the fixed cost is to use the data from invoices, right? So this is a limitation for high-low method, because we are not using the data from invoices, which is more reliable. This was all. This was the high-low method. So there is an assignment for this topic also, which I will drop in the description. So this was all. We'll meet in the next video. Bye.